didn't see you there. What are you doing here? Oh, you're looking for Tea Time with Tabi. February edition. Well, I'm pleased to say that you have come to the right place. Let's get into it. Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night, depending on when and where you are watching this. Welcome to Tea Time with Tabi, second episode. What is Tea Time with Tabi, you ask? I hear the people ask. If you don't know what Tea Time with Tabi is, I highly recommend you go onto my Instagram, look through my videos, I think it's the only other video that I've posted, and watch the first couple of minutes of Tea Time with Tabi January edition, which is the first Tea Time with Tabi I ever made, to get a full synopsis of what this video is about, what it entails, and how I decide the rankings that are shown in this video. But in short, for those who don't want to do that, Tea Time with Tabi is a monthly video where I talk about tea, drink tea, and spill the tea on the books I have been reading in a spoiler-free zone. No spoilers allowed. So if you love tea and you love books, then you're in the right place, and I highly suggest you stay here for the next 20-ish minutes or however long it takes me to get through the books I read this month. It's the end of February. Well done, you've made it through another month. February is Black History Month, so I hope you have all been educating yourselves, supporting Black creators and lifting up Black voices, but I also hope that we're doing that every single month, not just in February. Personally, I hope your journeys haven't been too stressful. I know February can be a bit of a tricky month because it's Valentine's Day, which can be a difficult day for some people, but also if you're living in the UK like me, it can be really dark and I find the lack of daylight very difficult. So if you're not feeling great right now, I hope you're feeling just a little bit better by the end of this video. And I'm excited to take you on the journey that was February's reads because, oh my word, did we go to some new places this month? I'm so excited to share with you everything that I've been reading. But I got a few complaints last time and they were fair, which is I didn't bring the tea into the video enough, so I am going to bring the tea into this video. I was thinking of doing like a really fancy tea like Assam or Lapsang Souchong or Darjeeling. But instead, this month, I'm going to start a debate. What is the best breakfast tea? It is PG Tips. I mean, there is no competition. If you disagree, it's okay. You don't have to be right. Going forward, we'll be introducing some cool teas, maybe some fruit teas. Who knows? The world is our oyster. But without further ado, let's get into February's reads. And a moment, of course, for February's reads. So, book one for this month was A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is the second book in the From Blood and Ash series. I realised that I also started last month with From Blood and Ash, and I think I'll also be starting March with the third one, so I'll try to not start with the same series every month. I'm reading lots of series at the moment, but not in tandem, so I'll jump from one series to another series to another series to a standalone. It's actually been really interesting jumping between the series because I really enjoy it because I get book hangovers quite badly, especially from ACOTAR. So it's been really lovely to go from world to world. And for people who are avid readers, I'm really interested. It's my question of the video. Do you read series in tandem? Do you jump between series? And if so, what's your opinion? It was really lovely to come back to this 1 month later and discover and pick up basically from where we left off. This got a 4 out of 5, and I've also just realised I forgot to say this is the second book in a series, so for any book that isn't the first in a series there will be some spoilers. I know I said it's spoiler free, it is spoiler free if you have read book 1 and not this book, so I will put the timestamps where you can skip to the next book if you don't want any spoilers. But without further ado, let's get into it. I have a lot to say about this book, but let's kick off with the plot summary. So, got where we left off. Poppy and Hawk, or Castile, because nobody saw that one coming. We did. Basically getting ready to travel to Atlantia. Now, at the end of the last book, if you have read it, you will know that Castile/Hawk obviously betrays Poppy, A, because he's the Dark One, she's really freaked out by that, but also he's basically said, I'm gonna sell you to these bad people so that I can get my brother back. And she's like, what? And then he changes his mind because they're in love, it's a whole thing. Book 2 is mostly about them travelling to Atlantia, his kingdom, with a new plot thread, which is he said, instead of selling you to get my brother back, I'm gonna marry you instead. because that makes sense. Actually, his reasoning is kind of accurate and it does make sense, but you know, to those who haven't read it, it sounds ridiculous. So most of the plot is spent traveling. This is my issue with this book, to Atlantia. A big portion of the book is spent in Spessa's End, which is an Atlantean settlement on the border of the Kingdom of Solace. What I think this book did really well is it improved all the weaknesses of the previous one. So it really leaned into the world building and the lore. You find out a lot more about the Wolvens and the bond that they have with the Atlanteans. You find out more about the different bloodlines in the Atlanteans. The main plot is obviously the romantic relationship between Cass and Poppy. And what I loved about this book, my favourite trope, at some point I'm going to do a trope ranking video and explain book tropes, but one of my favourite tropes is enemies to lovers, because it's a great trope. But my bugbear with enemies to lovers is occasionally it's depicted in a like CNC fantasy way, which just makes me really uncomfortable. It doesn't sit well with me. In this book, it was very believable. The, you know, transition from bodyguard to like kind of lovers to then enemies, then back to actually being in love. It was a genuinely believable arc, even though not a lot of action happened. I actually thought the way that she portrayed their relationship was very believable. Not a lot of plot, basically they just travel to get married. That's the plot summary, and they spend some time in one place. Characters. Okay, so Kieran. There is a scene between Cass, Poppy, and Kieran where Cass is a vampire and Kieran's his Wolven that they're bonded to, and Cass needs to eat some blood. Kieran is there holding him. Kieran's just, should we say, facilitating the feeding. Okay, that scene did not go the way I wanted it to go. That's all I'm gonna say, and I'm hoping that that scene develops in a different way in book 3. You know what I love about Poppy's character in particular is she always is able, I love that she's not the stereotypical body type, but B, I also love that she is so capable of defending herself, and it's believable. It's not like she just magically knows. She's been training. That Cass always, he doesn't protect, he doesn't shield her, he brings her into the fight, and I love that. That's one of my favourite parts of the book. Spicy scenes, passionate scenes were pretty good. I mean, I actually think they might have been better in book 1. Overall, I just thought this was an exciting read. It was, you know, getting back into fantasy romance. I really enjoyed it. I really recommend it to people who are a fan of the fantasy romance genre. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, and on Goodreads there were quite a few reviews that were like, I hate From Blood and Ash, and then I wrote this really cheesy thing which was like, isn't it great that there are so many readers and so many writers in the world that we can all have different tastes? What I love is that I've only had 7, but 7 is quite a lot, messages on Instagram and WhatsApp saying, you know, you've really inspired me to start reading again, which is like my favourite thing to hear, which is my advice to anyone who wants to get into reading. There is a book for you, there is a genre for you. You just have to do the shitty part at the beginning, which is reading a lot of different kinds of books to find out what you love. But I think a great place to start is also finding out what you really don't like, and then you can kind of pivot off that and you can really cut things out. That is A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. I think book 3 will make or break it, so I'm really interested to see where it goes. On to number 2. Book 2 of February. This is where we changed genres a little bit, and I have so many feelings about this book. It's also one of my new all-time favourites, so it's now holding a very special place in my heart, but I had the absolute pleasure of reading The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This got a solid 5 out of 5 from me. So, what is the plot? What's going on? Our unreliable narrator is Richard Papin, and he basically is studying at university. He goes to New Hampton College in the States, and he wants to enroll on this Greek program because he used to be studying as a doctor and they did some Greek lessons there and that doesn't work out for him. So he wants to sign up to this Greek program, but it's basically led by this eccentric professor and this group of students who are a cult. And so essentially the plot follows this group of characters who are navigating the society in which they're in and trying to basically bring in Greek myths into their real life. It's also a murder mystery. You find that out from the blurb on page 1, so that's not a spoiler. Because it's told through Richard's perspective, you get these really unreliable depictions of the characters, and you have to piece the mystery together. It's also, I think, a little bit of an allegory for King Pentheus and Dionysus, that myth, if anybody knows that story. I mean, it's amazing. Group of students, crazy Dionysian rituals, Greek mythology, studying, university, dark academia aesthetic. We need to have a moment for Mr. Henry Winter. Oh my lord! Pretty much attracted to tall, dark hair, slightly psychopathic, powerful, intelligent characters. The world building is so beautiful. I just completely immersed myself in the world of it and devoured it in 3 days, which I don't recommend because it's quite harrowing and dark at points. I felt weirdly like nauseous when I finished it and really kind of like spaced out by it because it's such a intense story. It's hands down one of the best books I've ever read. I love it so much. The plot is so clever, and the way that these characters get revealed and their motivations. Remember that it's satire before you go into it. We shouldn't be glorifying these characters. Don't come at me for my weird obsession with Henry Winter. Diversity wise, it's obviously not great, but I think that is part of the satire. You know, look at what these rich white kids are doing, studying Greek. Phrase everything in the best, in like the nicest sounding way. She does that in this book. The writing is just mesmerizing. I recommend to anybody who loves storytelling. If you love storytelling, you will love this book. It will sweep you off your feet, it will make you cry, it'll make you angry, it'll shock you, horrify you. A masterpiece, in my opinion. And onwards to number 3. We went into the Throne of Glass series. This is number 2 in the Throne of Glass series, Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas. It got a 4 out of 5 from me. I also realised in the first Tea Time with Tabi, I said she wrote it when she was 17. She didn't. She started writing it when she was 17, but it got published 10 years later. When I found that out, she doesn't get as many excuses. I think if I gave it a 3.5 out of 5, Throne of Glass, I will change my review to a 3 out of 5, because the writing style, even if it was 10 years later, not great. This, so much better. Oh my word, in every way conceivable. Selena is so much more likeable in it. The story is more believable. She really started to bring in the supernatural and the mystical, magical elements of the story. Really interesting. She started showing and not just telling, which is obviously really important in a novel. I mean, a much improved sequel. There are problems with it, yes. I get why people were angry about a certain scene in this book. So Selena has won the competition. She is now the king's champion, basically hired hitman, and she is being sent out to kill anybody that the king doesn't agree with, who threatens his power. But she's not doing that. No, I won't spoil what she's doing, but she's not killing them. She's doing something else. It just feels like a completely different story. It feels like this should have been book 1 in the series, but you have to read Throne of Glass to get it, to get to the good stuff. Alongside that, she's also been tasked by Queen Elena to find out the source of power from the King of Ardalan, very evil King of Ardalan. You've then got Dorian's plot running through it, which Dorian finds out something about himself that he can't control, and he's trying to learn how to use this gift that he's got. And then you've got Chaol, not Cole. I found out his name is Chaol. Chaol, the bodyguard, who Selena starts to have a bit of a romantic relationship with, but I won't spoil where that goes. I really loved that healthy female friendship with Nehemia. It's really important, although what happens to Nehemia is not great. By the end of it, Selena also has another plot thread that comes into it, but I don't want to say that just because that kind of sets up the arc for book 3, which I'll be reading in March. So in terms of world building, I would say the first book was better. I mean, we're pretty much in the same world for this one, and there's nothing particularly new in it. The characters were a lot better, much more improved, much more complicated. I love Dorian's storyline. I actually like him more than Selena. And usually we see a male identifying character and he's tearing through stuff to save the female identifying character, and it's like, rah, and it's kind of attractive. And then they reversed that in this book, and the male identifying character in it, Chaol, is completely repulsed by her. And I don't know if Sarah J. Maas was doing that as a comment on the way that strong women are seen. If she was, round of applause. If she wasn't, I'd take it as that anyway. I thought it was an interesting observation and very true. The plot for this one, It was okay. Again, like, I feel it's setting up for this big, like, Frodo epic arc for her. So, you know, it's a 7-book series. I think we've just got a long way to go, so I'm really just enjoying it at the moment. I don't feel like I can recommend series until I've read them. You know, with From Blood and Ash, certainly after book 3, there's going to be a 6-book series, but there's only 4 out. I feel like I've got a pretty good grip on that. This is a full series, and there are some very hardcore Throne of Glass fans. I still prefer ACOTAR. I'm not gonna lie, I love ACOTAR. I know there's stuff that's wrong with ACOTAR too, but I love it. From what I've read so far, this is a good book. I think if you like YA fantasy, you will enjoy it. On to number 4. This is Thinking Fast, and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. This was the first non-fiction I've read in a while, and the first non-fiction of 2022. I picked a bad one. It's not that the book is bad, it's just misrepresented. It was a chore. I love reading. Reading is one of my favourite things to do if it's the right book. Life is too short to read bad books, right? So DNFing, I totally believe in DNFing. But I wanted to get through this one, and also I think it only started to become a chore just under the halfway mark. And when I get to the halfway mark, I feel like there's that contract. You've invested X amount of time, so you feel like you kind of should get a reward out of it. So I just thought, I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna get through it. What is this book about? One would think, judging by the blurb and the reviews, that this is a book about how to think. And to some extent it is. Daniel Kahneman talks about the 2 different systems that we have in our brains. System 1, the fast thinker, the impulsive thinker, the immediate response. And system 2, which is the slow thinker, that brings rationality, that looks at the whole picture. And the first 100 pages are brilliant. They really, really are. There are these, like, you get to participate with it. There are these different exercises so you can engage system 1 and system 2. He tells it as a story with these characters. I was loving it. The first day I was like, oh, this is great. This is so much fun. The rest of it, because it didn't stay a book about how we think, it became a book about how we judge statistics, which is an interesting subject to statisticians, I'm sure. If you have dyscalculia, the exercises are incredibly mathematical. So I literally spent 20 minutes trying to figure out one exercise because my brain just doesn't compute numbers very well. So he kicks out some of his own audience members, which I just felt was a bit crap. Don't get me wrong, he's an incredibly intelligent man. He's really interesting. His life is fascinating. But I think he got so overexcited by his subject that he wrote a 400-page book that should have been a 200-page book. The one thing that really stuck in my brain about this book is there's a paragraph about optimists and cynics and how optimists live longer, and there is research to back this up, how they have better immune systems, they're more likely to take risks. And I just had this thing about, you know, I think it's really important to practice gratitude and be thankful for what we have, you know, even if we're having a bad day. And so I really loved that. That really stuck out to me. I think for the right reader, it is a really clever book, but it is not what it's sold as. So the right reader probably isn't picking it up. He talks a lot about different heuristics and different effects and biases that we have, and that is really interesting. But some of it just felt like common sense wrapped up in complex language. And that was a bugbear for me. He himself says, if you were trying to explain something in extraordinarily complex language, that doesn't mean you understand it very well. And then he went and did that exact thing. And I was like, what are you doing? Quite a lot of the book was about how we phrase things. So for example, if you're in the supermarket and you see a thing of meat and it says 90% fat-free, then people are more likely to buy it. But if it said 10% fat, people are less likely to buy it. I feel like that is just common sense though. I think everybody knows that. Like if you phrase something in a negative way, people are less likely to be attracted to it. Some of it went over my head, I'm not gonna lie to you. It doesn't feel like it has an anchor point, it's going all over the place. But I'm glad I got through it, and I am genuinely glad I read it. But I also am glad I read it, so you don't have to. We're halfway, so on to the second half of February's reads, on to book number 5. This is the absolute mess of a series known as The Bargainer, or book 2 in the Bargainer series, A Strange Hymn. Now, I don't want you to skip this first couple of minutes because you need to hear them. There are no spoilers, but I will list the timestamps when I start talking about them. Yeah, my perspective has changed hugely on this series, and whatever I review, I can't remember what I gave it. For January, I think it was 3.5. Yeah, no. There are a lot of things wrong with this book. You have those authors, the guilty pleasure authors, who they're a little bit like, it's like they're not doing anything wrong, but there are things they could do better. Do you know what I mean? There are those kind of authors. This is an author who's doing everything wrong. There are two main reasons why this series is horrendous, and I cannot in all good conscience recommend it to anyone. Number one, the CNC style fantasy that's going on. So my main character, Callie, has this ring of black beads with IOUs that she owes the bargainer as deeds. In this book, he jokes about making her do things with the beads. You know, I said in the first video, I'm not going to slander authors. Laura, I'm coming for you, and I'm coming for you good. She needs to do better. There's no excuse. A whole joke about forcing her to do stuff that is sexual and isn't sexual, and it never happens, right? It's like we're constantly flirting with that line, but it's just so shit. So there's that, and then you realise that there's kind of grooming hints from the first book. The other big issue, I'm not going to go into great depth about this because there are better creators who have more authority to go into depth about this. If you would like to know some videos that talk about the bargainer and there's the thing I'm going to talk about in a second in more depth, please send me a message and I'm really happy to share those with you. But on a brief note, this is a white female author. There is one PGM character in this book. She's a black sorceress called Temper. Whilst Temper does play a really important role in the story, her dialogue is, in short, it's a shocking portrayal of a character. It's not excusable, it's just horrific. I hated it. The plot is essentially Callie and Dez's relationship evolves, and then they have to go to a different kingdom to complete the solstice ritual, and these people are still disappearing. The Thief of Souls, who you think is captured in the first book, he's the primary antagonist, is not. The only good bit in this book was revealing who the Thief of Souls is. Everything else is a mess. It's a complete mess. As author, we have a responsibility to do better and educate ourselves and tell interesting stories. Plot is lackluster. So many people are glorifying this series. I am here to say, don't read it. And that is pretty much all I have to say on it. I don't want to bash something over the head when other people have done it much more eloquently than I, and I do not in any good conscience recommend this. Mexican Gothic was oh my god, it healed some trauma. Mexican Gothic gets a solid 4.5 out of 5 from me. Our protagonist Noemi is like a glamorous socialite in Mexico City, and she gets a letter, or her father, sorry, gets a letter from her cousin Catalina, which is basically this kind of rambling, held hostage and all these crazy visions. So Noemi, kind of forced by her father, goes to High Place, which is the Gothic mansion which the horrible Doyle family live in, and Catalina has married the son, Virgil. So Noemi is there to kind of figure out what's going on, and it turns into a brilliant Gothic mystery. It is not a simple haunting. There is so much going on in this book. It is fabulous. And also gross, which is why it doesn't have a 5 out of 5, because it is gross. Brilliant. It's eerie, it's creepy, it's disturbing. It's such a good Halloween read. Oh my gosh. Quite small, you see, compared to some of the books I've been reading. I don't recommend going through it quickly. World building, incredible. I mean, disgusting, but incredible. The characters are loathsome and fantastic, and each one is creepier than the one before. You are so rooting for Noemi, but she's kind of annoying a little bit, which I liked. Like, she's annoying in an interesting way, not annoying in a repulsive way like Selena is in Throne of Glass. I was really nervous to come back to a genre that I had loved and then really steered clear from, and this reawakened my love for it. She's a brilliant author. Passion-wise, this book made me feel a lot. Mostly disgusted, I'm not gonna lie, but that was kind of, it's a good disgust. So why is it not a full 5 out of 5? More sensible reason, the pacing is a little bit off. It goes from 0 to 60 in 3.5. And it's not the fact that the events happen in the last 50 pages, because that's fine. I don't mind a book going, the last 50 pages everything happens, but usually there's a bit of a crescendo before the last 50 pages. And then my other one is just a personal bugbear. It's gross, and I know it's gross for a good reason, but it's gross. I loved it. Thank you so much, Sophie, for recommending it. It was fantastic. You obviously know me very well, and I recommend to anyone who loves spooky stories. On to the penultimate read of February, The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is a beautiful, queer love story set in ancient Greece. This got a 4 out of 5 from me. I think it probably would have got a 4.5 out of 5 if I hadn't had seen so many reviews about it. If you go on Book Talk, if you look at the reviews anywhere, it's overhyped. So I'm not here to do that. If you haven't read The Song of Achilles and you know nothing about it, don't look at the reviews for it, because it will give you a picture of the book in your head that it won't live up to. The plot is obviously great. It's a retelling of the Iliad through a different lens, which is Patroclus's perspective. The plot is basically Patroclus from birth to death. We see him growing up, sent to Peleus's kingdom, and he meets Achilles there, and we see them go from strangers to friends to lovers, and then on the battlefield at Troy. We got a soldier's perspective of the war, which I thought was fascinating. Thing is about the plot, I don't know how you can rate it, because it's not her plot, but it is her plot. Does that make sense? You can tell that she's passionate about Greek mythology, and I loved that. That really came through in the book. The characters, again, are believable and real, and you see why they make the decisions they make. Everything that goes wrong in this book is down to two things. Let's give 20% to the gods, because they're pretty annoying, but 80% of it, I feel like in most stories and film ever, of stuff that goes wrong is due to male ego. Right, you feel so frustrated at points and so angry with these characters. Reading queer love stories, it was fantastic, and I'm looking forward to reading more of those. So the love, the romance was beautiful, it was real, it was convincing. You really see how they fall in love with each other, and the heartache at the end. Because it was overhyped, it just wasn't what I pictured. And I know that's not fair, and I'm sorry, Madeline, not that you're watching this at all, but I am sorry. The other thing is, I know this is a really personal thing, I didn't really enjoy the writing style of it, certainly in the beginning, but I warmed up to it. Again, that's just personal preference. I recommend to anyone who loves mythology, to anyone who loves story, to anyone who loves love. I just think it's a great book. Thank you, Sophie, again for recommending this. On to the final book of February. Well, we are here. We're at the final read, which I finished last night from when I'm recording this. This is Glint by Raven Kennedy. It is book 2 in the Plated Prisoner series. As this is the last one in the video, I will really try to keep this spoiler free, and I won't include a skip time. So, I mean, you can skip if you'd like, but the only bit is just the wrap up at the end. I'm not gonna lie, not a lot happens in this book, so there aren't many spoilers. This got another 3 out of 5 from me, and it's not that it was a bad book. I was just waiting for something to happen in every chapter. You're like, oh, it's gonna happen now, it's gonna happen now. And then it happens right in the last bloody chapter, and you're like, great, so I have to read book 3. Book 3 has got amazing reviews, but I kind of feel ripped off. I feel like, actually, there was a little pun there for anyone who's read. It's because he's Commander Rip. Basically, I think book 1 and book 2 should have been merged together, and I think I'm saying that as well because I've seen a couple of other reviewers say that. Pretty much similar to A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire in that they're trying to travel to one place. Oren, this golden touched concubine, has been captured by the 4th Kingdom's army. There are 6 kingdoms in Araya. What are there? Travelling to have a bargain, reunite her with Midas, and the king of the 4th kingdom is called King Ravenger or King Rot, and he literally destroys everything he touches. So most of it is told through Oren's perspective, although we have a few chapters told through Queen Melina's perspective, who is Midas's wife. Those chapters were rubbish. I'm not gonna lie to you, Raven. I think they were, I get what she was trying to do. She was trying to make a Cersei type character, but it was done so heavy-handedly that it was just a bit cringy at points to read some of the stuff that she does. The plot is not great. Characters are interesting, you get more characters brought in, but again quite one-toned, and Oren's emancipation only starts in the final like 2-3 chapters, so it's frustrating because I feel like we're coming to this really great arc, but we didn't quite get it. There is a fabulous plot twist at the very end that I genuinely didn't see coming, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Book 1 is shocking. Book 2 is very different in tone. That's why I think they should have been merged together, because book 1 is filled with extreme sex. You are meant to feel repulsed by it. She's brilliant. She describes it in such a mechanical, brutal way. And there is no sex in book 2. I just don't know what was happening with this book. I think she didn't know what was happening. Unlike The Bargainer, I will be continuing this series because I really am holding out hope. But hopefully book 3 will be enough to encourage me to read the final installment in the Plated Prisoner series. Again, I don't feel like I can recommend it yet because I haven't read enough of the series, but It was an interesting read. It felt like a kind of weird way to end the month. We sort of went all up and down over the place with ratings and genres. And I think that's all I have to say on Glint. Welcome to the wrap up for February's edition of Tea Time with Tabi. My tea question for this video was, what is your favourite kind of breakfast tea? It should be peachy tips. And my book question for this video is, if you are a reader or even a non-reader, I'd be interested what you think about this. What is your opinion on reading series in tandem as opposed to jumping from book to book? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments, or a couple of people DM me after the last video, so let me know, because I love these conversations that we're having and I love that some people are being inspired to read more, which is my favourite thing to hear. I hope you're feeling a little bit better after watching this video, and I will also be uploading these all onto YouTube as well. Exciting times. Already plan my March reads, but if you recommend anything for me to review or read, please let me know. And I will also be looking at maybe doing some like specific book reviews, so longer videos or like video essays for specific books if I have time. And finally, book of the month goes to, you can probably guess, but it goes to The Secret History. Hands down, both month of February, absolutely adored it. My runner-up is Mexican Gothic. Thank you so much for watching this video, for messaging, for commenting, for engaging with all of this new content that I'm putting out. I'm so glad people are enjoying it. It just makes my heart happy to talk about books and see more people reading. I hope you're having a lovely day, afternoon, evening or night, wherever you are. Stay safe, pick up a book, and I will see you next month for March's edition of Tea Time with Tabi.